Okay, let's start. So our topic for today is about integrating factors. Ano ba tong integrating factor or integrating factor? Diba last time we learned about exact differential equations. Now, what if the differential equation is non-exact or hindi exact yung DE, first order differential equation? So don't worry, may way tayo na para magawa na maging exact yung differential equation. And that is by introducing an integrating factor. Now, may dalawang ways para ma-determine yung integrating factor. Yung una is by inspection and the other one is by using a formula. So yun yung i-derive natin ngayon. So solving for an obtaining the integrating factor using a formula. So basically yung topic na to is how to solve non-exact differential equation. Yan, so start tayo. We let first yung form ng ating first order DE, which is m, the function of x and y, times dx plus n, function of x and y, times dy. So this first order differential equation, and let this be a non-exact DE. Okay, now we also have an integrating factor. So let I, we'll be using I to represent the integrating factor. So let I be an integrating factor again. So this integrating factor is a factor that we will use to make the differential equation exact. Make the DE exact. Now, what we will do is we will multiply this integrating factor dun sa ating given a first order DE na non-exact. So let this be our first equation, sorry. Equation number 1. So we will multiply both sides of the equation 1 by this integrating factor and denoted by I. The result will be, so I times the first order DE. So m dx, so kahit m na lang lalagay natin, we know that m is a function of x and y, plus n dy equal to 0. Okay, pag nagawa na natin to, that we were able to multiply the integrating factor doon sa ating first order differential equation, so this will now become an exact equation. So I times m dx plus I times n dy equals I times 0 is 0. So ibig sabihin, this will be, this DE is now exact. Is now exact. Tanggalin mo na itong now. Exact na lang. Okay. So as you know, we have, tapos na bang copyhin? So before I proceed to the next page, di ba sa exact differential equation, meron tayong testing. So we take the partial derivative of m with respect to y and take the partial derivative of n with respect to x. Kapag nag-equal yung partial derivatives na to, then that differential equation is exact. So gawin din natin dito. So let me just copy sa next page. We copy first. So I times m dx plus I times n dy equal to 0. So dahil nag-multiply na tayo ng integrating factor doon sa non-exact DE, naging exact na ito. So this means that na yung partial derivative, yung coefficient ni dx, so partial derivative of I times m with respect to y is equal dun sa partial derivative ng I times n with respect to x. Tandaan ha, so I is a function that you introduce or a factor that you introduce dun sa first order differential equation. Now, if we differentiate this with respect to y, so product rule, I times m yan. So I, derivative or partial derivative ni m with respect to y plus m times partial derivative of I with respect to y is equal to, now differentiating I times n with respect to x. We have I, partial derivative of partial derivative of n with respect to x plus n times partial derivative of I with respect to x. Now let this be our equation number 2. And kasi yung ating integrating factor for this particular na method, it's either a pure function of x lang siya or a pure function of y. Now we will let our integrating factor. Yan. So let the integrating factor be a pure function of x. Sa x mo tayo magsimula. Pure function of x. Or basically, f of x. Lagay lang natin. So ibig sabihin yan, since I is a pure function of x, if you are to differentiate I with respect to y, ano yung magiging result niyan? Since x nga ito, 0 yung partial derivative ni I with respect to y. And in this case, yung partial derivative of I with respect to x will become an ordinary derivative or total differential na di over dx. Kasi nga, yung y sa part na to, ay itong partial of I with respect to y is 0 na. So, itong partial of I natin with respect to x is now an ordinary derivative. Now, plugging in these dun sa ating equation number 2, let's rewrite equation number 2. Yan, tandaan niyo ha, copying ko muna. Now, equation number 2 can be written as ano nga ba yung balikan natin? Yan, I times partial of m with respect to y. So I, partial of m with respect to y. Yung pangalawang term is magiging 0 na, no? Ito guys, balikan lang natin. Change ko lang yung color. So this will become 0. And this will become total differential or ordinary derivative na di over dx. So here we have yan, I times partial of m with respect to y is equal to I times partial of n with respect to x. Okay. Tama, no? And partial of x plus n, yan, di over dx. Yung idea ng ginawa ko na to, di ba, kinuha natin yung partial derivatives kasi equal yung partial derivatives ni m with respect to y dun sa partial derivative ni n with respect to x para masabi na exact equation siya. Now, our objective here is to determine the integrating factor. So, transpose natin tong term na to dun sa left side. This will become I times, ayan, dahil sa meron silang I both, we can factor out I. So, partial of m with respect to y minus partial of n with respect to x. And yung natira dun sa right side is n di over dx. Okay. Since we let that the integrating factor be a pure function of x, yan muna natin, cross-multiply natin. We need to separate the variables. Yung I kay di, ito naman sa kabilang side. So, we multiply the entire equation by dx para di nilang matitira dito in differential mode. And to eliminate n here, we divide the entire equation by n. And also here, kasi kailangan napunta yung I dito sa kabilang side, divide the entire equation by I. And the resulting equation will be, ito na lang sa kabilang side yung I. So di over I is equal to 1 over n times the difference, partial of m with respect to y minus partial of n with respect to x, times dx. Okay, so the next step is to integrate so that we can obtain the integrating factor. And taking note that integrating factor is a pure function of x. Kaya itong expression na to, ayun ko lang yung color. So this 1 over n times the difference of partial of m with respect to y minus partial of n with respect to x. Yan is a pure function of x. Kasi nga nilet natin na si I is a pure function of x. Then we can say that by integrating both sides of the equation, and this will become a pure function of x, we have ln of I equals the integral of f of x times dx. Now, to obtain I, we take the inverse, or anti-ln, exponential function. Nakopya na? Okay, let's move on to the next page. Am I too fast? Or sakto lang? Sige, so inverse na lang natin. So e raised to ln of I is equal to e raised to the integral of f of x dx. And this will become, so e raised to ln of I is equal to I equals e raised to the integral of f of x times dx. So this will now be our formula in finding for the integrating factor. Provided that it's a pure function of x yung kanina, yung difference ng partial derivatives divided by n should be a pure function of x. Okay, next. Okay, naririnig ko kaya ako? I hope so. Now let's try again Yan. Similarly, let's try it na function of y naman. So, move na ako sa next line. So, let I be an integrating factor na pure function of y naman siya. So, kanina gumamit tayo ng f to represent the function of y. So, here we have g of y, where this means a pure function of y. So kapag ganon, if babalikan natin yung kaninang equation, diba? If you remember, we have I times the partial derivative of m with respect to y plus m times the partial derivative of I with respect to y should be equal to I times partial derivative of n with respect to x plus n times the partial derivative of I with respect to x. So, sa ganitong case naman that I is a pure function of y, ibig sabihin that if we differentiate I with respect to x, yan, partial of I with respect to x, dahil si I is a function of y, eh di ba yung y is held constant? So derivative ng constant is 0. Ang mangyari naman sa partial derivative ng I with respect to y will become a total differential or ordinary derivative na di over dy. Okay, now we plug in or rewriting the equation 2 again. Ito, so mangyayari lang dyan is this will become 0. So rewriting equation number 2 will give us I times partial of m with respect to y plus m di over dy equals I times partial of n with respect to x. And the same idea, pagsamahin natin yung terms na merong I dun sa kabilang side. So, transpose lang natin to. We'll move on to the next page. This will be I partial of m with respect to y minus I partial of n with respect to x equals n, right? Partial of I with respect to y. Balikan natin para ma-make sure na tama. Ito, retained, pero hindi na siya partial, to, ordinary derivative na pala siya. Purahin lang natin to. So this will be di over dy. Factoring out I here, so I times the partial of m with respect to y minus partial of n with respect to x is equal to n. Yan, di over dy. Now, separate the variables pagdating dito. So, tanggalin mo si dy sa right side. Then divide the entire equation by I and m. So, this becomes di over I equals, ito na yun, cancel si m. Sa kabilang side, interchange lang natin yung positions nila. So, we have 1 over m times the difference partial of n with respect to y minus partial of n with respect to x times dy. Now, since diba declare na natin na I is a pure function of y, so this means that itong part na to, yan, function natin should be a pure function of y. Now, if we integrate both sides of the equation, we have ln of I, tuloy naman talaga yung sagot niyan, di ba? Integral of di over I is ln of I, and this becomes integral of g of y. Yeah, sorry, na-forgot ko pala. Dapat negative yung sign dito. And transposing if we are going to Yan. Di ba, transpose itong term na to sa kabilang side, magbabago yung sign, di ba? So, magiging negative siya. So, forgot. Ito negative na rin. So, yeah, divide natin by negative din dito. So, we have now negative here. Okay, so ln of I equals negative integral of g of y times dy, function of y. Okay? So, kung napansin niyo, talagang we followed kung ano yung order ng yung pagkuha ng difference, di ba? Kasi magiging positive din naman ito kapag nauna yung partial of n with respect to x. So, kunyari, partial of n with respect to x minus partial of m with respect to y. So, what I did, ginaya lang din natin yung ginawa doon sa una kanina na nauna muna yung partial derivative of m with respect to y. Yan, tapos yung subtract natin yung partial of m with respect to x. Yan, para kapag nag-solve na tayo later, yan, yun na lang yung susunod natin na order na take the difference. So, yung partial of m with respect to y, yung subtract partial of n with respect to x. And if ever, yan, inspect natin yung mismong resulting na yung mga coefficients, yung m tsaka n, and we select now kung ano yung appropriate na coefficient to divide para mag-result siya sa either pure function of x or a pure function of y. So dahil sa sinunod pa rin natin yung order, kaya magiging negative lang yung integrating factor kapag yung I mo is a pure function of y. So don't forget to include this negative sign. So now we have the integrating factor by taking the inverse of both sides of this equation. So I is equal to e raised to the negative integral of g of y and g of y times dy. Okay, so let's summarize now these two cases. Na yung I is a pure function of x and a pure function of y. So note nyo pala na hindi lahat ng differential equations na non-exact ay merong integrating factor. So itong case lang na to na meron tayong integrating factor is para sa pure functions only. So I being a pure function of x and another case is I as a pure function of y. And to summarize these two cases or two formulas for finding the integrating factor, let me just write again to summarize this. So, tandaan na we denote I as the integrating factor. So, para sa non-exact na DE, for a non-exact differential equation, ano ba yung format ng ating differential equation? And that is m dx plus n dy equal to 0. The first case natin is that if itong 1 over n times the difference in partial of m with respect to y and minus partial of n with respect to x, yeah, ay naging equal dun sa pure function of x, then we use the formula I is equal to e raised to the integral of f of x times dx. Ito yung formula natin na gagamitin. The second case is that if yan, 1 over m or yung difference divided by m na coefficient, partial of m with respect to y minus partial of n with respect to x ay nag-result sa pure function of y, then we use this formula. And I is equal to e raised to the negative integral. Tandaan na may negative siya. G of y dy. Nasundan po ba? Tandaan niyo how we just follow the same format. Ito, nauna mo na yung partial of m with respect to y. Kasi kung gusto mong mag-positive ito, unahin mo tong partial of n. Okay, pero para hindi mahirapan later, kapag nag-trial and error ka, at least you can actually divide na lang either m or n dun sa difference at lalabas na Dapat pure function. So kapag constant ang lalabas, say for instance, ito, kinuha mo yung difference nila. And then you divide n. Di ba n is a coefficient of our expression representing, di ba, the coefficient of dy yung partner niyan. It's as if that you are canceling yung y dyan na function. So dapat lalabas is pure function of x. Right? Constant po yung lumabas. So kapag constant, function of x pa rin naman siya. Gets? Now, if in case na dinivide mo yung difference by this expression, yung m is coefficient ni dx. So it's as if that you are canceling or dividing, parang tinatanggal natin dito yung x na variable. So dapat yung lalabas dito is a pure function of y. Now kapag nangyari na sa both of these cases na hindi siya pure function, hindi din constant ang lumabas, ibig sabihin walang integrating factor na pure function yung ating differential equation. Do you follow? So these are the two formulas. Any question? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, sa equation 2 po, yung partial of n over partial of x po yun.
Saan?
Sa equation 2 po.
Equation 2, ito ba yun? Or
Yung sa partial of n over partial of x po ba yan?
yes, partial of x.
Thank you po.
Okay, let's move on to solving some examples. Example number 1. Let us solve this. X dy plus y dx equals x y dx. Okay, so x dy plus y dx is equal to x times y dx. As you can see, hindi siya nakaayos into an mdx and dy na format. So what we will do is we will put that into an mdx and dy na format. Ano yung sinasabi ko na yun? So mdx plus ndy equal to 0. So transpose natin to dun sa left side and factor out na lang yung dx. Yan, solution. Ibahin ko na lang yung color. Transposing this to the left side will be, we will have y minus xy, nirekta ko na guys na, times dx plus x dy equal to 0. Tama naman, no? Now, so dito sa case na to, ano yung m natin? M is the coefficient of dx. So that is y minus xy. Or basically, that is factoring out y. So y times 1 minus x. So we will differentiate now. We will test the DE for exactness. Kung hindi man siya mag-equal yung partial derivatives, so wag kayong mag-alala kasi pwede pa nating kunin yung difference and then later on find out or makuha natin yung value ng integrating factor. So take the partial derivative of m with respect to y. Tandaan ha, m is coefficient to dx, so we are to differentiate with respect to y. Pag ganun, x na, yung variable x is held constant. So in this case, yung 1 minus x, copyhin lang natin siya. And then differentiate y with respect to y. So dy over dy. 1. Kaya ang result natin dito is 1 minus x. Now, our n here is x. Yan. N is the coefficient of dy. Now, take the partial of n with respect to what? X. So, yan. dx over dx, 1 yung sagot. Dahil dyan, hindi equal, no? Yung partial derivative of m with respect to y is not equal to the partial derivative of n with respect to x. ang next step natin is to take the difference. Sige, huwag mo munang ilalagay kung ano yung divide kung n ba or n. Nakadepende yun sa result ng difference nila. So, partial of m with respect to y, yan, i-subtract natin yung partial of n with respect to x. Yan, mamaya mo na ilagay yung kung ano yung divide natin. So, here, 1 minus x siya. Yung partial of n naman with respect to x is 1. So, minus 1. What's the result? So, 1 minus x minus 1, negative x. Okay? Negative x yung ating result, yung difference. Now, if you are to divide m, tingnan mo yung si m ha, doon sa difference, may makakancel ka ba dyan? Magiging purong function na lang bang matitira? Di ba hindi? Both variables x and y pa rin are present doon sa mismong result nito if you are to divide this difference by m. If you are to divide the difference by n, n is the coefficient of dy. So it's as if you are canceling yung y. Dapat ang lalabas dyan is pure function of x. Kung constant man, pure function of x pa rin yun. Sige, ito kasi x lang din, so for sure, you will get what you wanted. So i-divide natin itong difference by, doon ka na mag-decide kung anong i-divide mo, by this n. Tandaan now, you are canceling the variable y dyan. Dapat pure function of x yung lalabas. So n is x. So divided by x. The result is negative 1, so which is a pure function of x pa rin naman to. So this will be f of x. Okay, now that we have a pure function of x, having utilized this formula, so we now obtain the integrating factor. Ano ba yung integrating factor natin? Let's move on here. So I is equal to e raised to the integral of f of x times dx. Natapos bang kopyahin yung previous kanina, guys? Okay na dito? Okay, silence means yes. Now we plug in here. So I is equal to e raised to integral of negative 1 times dx. The answer for our integrating factor is e raised to negative x. Now we are going to utilize this to make the given equation an exact equation. So ano ba yung given natin? Na dE. So ito na yung kopyahin lang natin yung nakaayos na. So y minus xy dx plus x dy equal to 0. So may kopyahin ko muna yung dE. Y minus xy times dx plus x dy equal to 0. We now multiply the entire equation by this integrating factor na e raised to negative x. And this will now become an exact equation. But of course, we need to test pa din using the test for exactness. So distributing, e raised to negative x, so we have y minus xy e raised to negative x dx plus x times e raised to negative x dy equal to 0 times e raised to negative x is 0. So ano na yung m natin dito? Sige, mag-test na tayo. So our m is this. Our n is x times e raised to negative x. So we take the partial derivative of m with respect to y. Yan, pag ganon, x will be held constant. So dito, sa unang term, if you distribute na ngayon yung e raised to negative x, so magiging siya, y e raised to negative x minus xy e raised to negative x. So differentiating this, e raised to negative x is held constant. Copyhin lang natin. Differentiate y with respect to y, so times 1 ka dyan. Sa pangalawang term naman, x is held constant, so you copy x e raised to negative x. Differentiate y with respect to y, so times 1. Now going to sa next term naman, so we take the partial derivative of n with respect to x. Y is held constant. Kasi pure function of x naman ito, so no problem. We just utilize the product rule method para ma-differentiate natin. So copy x, differentiate e raised to negative x. So we copy e raised to negative x, differentiate negative x, that is negative 1. So meron kang negative sign dyan. And then the next part is plus e raised to negative x, differentiate x with respect to x times 1. What have you noticed? Yan, magkaiba lang sila ng pagkakaayos, pero the partial derivative of m with respect to y is now equal to partial derivative of n with respect to x. So nangyari na naging exact siya after nating ma-multiply yung integrating factor doon sa non-exact equation or sa ating given na first order DE. So pagdating dito, we can now utilize yung shortcut natin or yung short method natin sa pag-solve ng exact equation. So no need to utilize the long method. Paano nga ba yung short method, sir? If you remember, so solving for exact, the integral of m dx, in first term, taking note that y is held constant, plus integral of n dy, pero sa pag-integrate na to, you integrate only pure function of y or those terms without x. Tapos equal to the arbitrary constant c. I-copy na natin. Let me change the color. Yan, ito na yung copyhin natin, guys. Yung meron ng integrating factor. So y minus an integral of y minus y xy times e raised to negative x dx plus integral of x times e raised to negative x dy equal to c. Diba sabi natin, itong term na to, you only integrate a pure function of y or those without x. And may x sila, so this will now be 0. So ito na lang yung nasa first term gagawin natin. So integrate natin, distribute lang natin yung y times e raised to negative x. In this case, y is held constant. Lalabas mo yung y dito, integral of e raised to negative x times dx minus, labas mo rin yung y ulit, integral of x times e raised to negative x dx pala. Yan, pure function of x equal to the arbitrary constant c. So sa unang term, you need to have a neutralizing factor, di ba? Kasi nga negative x, so dapat yung differential dito is also negative dx. So you put neutralizing factor na negative sa labas para masatisfy natin yung formula for integration. Yung pangalawang term naman, you can solve this by integration by parts. Yan, integration by parts. You can utilize the tabular method since algebraic times exponential siya. So unahin muna natin yung first term. So this will become yan, negative y e raised to negative x. Ang sagot natin dito. So dito naman sa negative y times. Okay, integrate natin using integration by parts using tabular method. Ano ba yung tabular method, sir? Diba? U dv. Diba yung formula ng integration by parts, if you remember, guys? So that is what? Integral of u dv is equal to u v minus integral of v times du. So same lang yung idea sa tabular method. It's just that nakahiwalay na yung u. Applicable lang tong tabular method kapag meron kang algebraic function doon. So isa sa mga factors is algebraic function. Katulad nito, your u is an algebraic function. So x, wait lang, ibahin ko yung color. Our u is x. Ang dv natin is itong e raised to negative x times dx. So instead of writing dx, e raised to negative x na lang. Sa left side or sa left column, what you will do is you differentiate hanggang sa mag-zero. Eh di ba kapag exponential function, hindi siya mag-zero kapag i-differentiate mo siya ng i-differentiate. Kaya dapat algebraic function lang yung nasa left column. Nasa right side naman, you just integrate. Itapat mo lang siya dun sa mismong row na mag-zero siya. Differentiating x, 1. Differentiating 1, 0. So hanggang dito ka lang pwede mag-integrate. Now, you integrate this first row natin. The same lang yung result nun. So it's negative e raised to negative x. Integrate pala. Integrate mo to. So it's negative e raised to negative x. Integrate again. So you have positive e raised to negative x. Dahil yung formula ng ating integration by parts, it's uv minus integral of v times du. So yung sign nag-alternate, no? So from positive, we just put sign. So u, ito na yung v niya pag after mo integrate. So positive yung sign. U times v. Negative na yung sign. So lagay natin yung result dito. So u times v, it's negative x e raised to negative x. Ayan, u times v. So positive times negative. So magiging negative e raised to negative x yung result dyan. Okay, may tanong ba dito, guys? Nagets ba yung ginawa ko? So maganda to kapag kunyari mataas yung, or pag polynomial siya, no? Or mataas yung power or degree itong x na to. Pero kapag x lang din, pwede naman yung long method sa integration by parts na method. So, ganito yung color. Tulad nito. So, yung u natin is x. Di ba? Kunin mo yung du mo and that is dx. And then your dv is e raised to negative x dx. Integrate lang natin to para makuha yung v. So this will be negative e raised to negative x. So ganun lang din. So u times v, di ba magiging negative x e raised to negative x, minus integral of v times du. So ano ba yung minus integral of v? Ang v mo is negative e raised to negative x dx. It will result to e raised to negative x. Pwede naman, tapos copy mo lang yung negative sign. May negative dyan para masatisfy nyo lang yung mismong differential. So that's it. The same lang yung kalalabasan kasi. Ito tabular method, ito yung usual na ginagamit natin. Do you follow? Are you still there?
Yes po.
Okay, now that we have this solution, ayusin na lang natin. Yan, distribute natin tong negative y. Baka may makancel pa dyan. So, let's proceed to the next page. Nakopya na ba? Tapos nang kopyahin?
Yes po.
Let me change the color of the pen. So here we have negative y e raised to negative x. Distribute lang natin yung negative y dito. So magiging positive, positive siya. So it will become positive xy e raised to negative x plus y e raised to negative x equal to the arbitrary constant c. Tama ba? Ayan. So as you can see, pwedeng makancel to like terms. So cancel na natin to. Ang matitira dyan is xy e raised to negative x equal to c. Ito na nga yung ating general solution. Or if you want, pwede mong tanggalin yung exponential function dito, divide the entire equation by e raised to negative x, or simply itong 1 over e raised to negative x is what? E raised to positive x yan. So this will now become x times y equals c times e raised to positive x. So this is now our general solution, our final answer. Questions? Yan, burahin ko na lang ito baka ma-confuse kayo. Basta, yan, FYI lang, di ba? 1 over e raised to negative x is equal to e raised to positive x. Or pwedeng irekta mo na i-multiply mo yung e raised to positive x dito. Okay. Can you move on to the next example? So itong next example natin, so kayo naman yun ang magtatapos ng pagsosolve nito. Umpisahan lang natin. Let me write first the given. Example number 2. Solve. The given is 2xy squared minus 2y times dx plus 3x squared y minus 4x dy equal to 0. Okay, first thing, i-test muna natin yung DE for exactness. And that is by taking the partial derivatives. Ito yung ating m. Ito naman yung ating n. Okay, m is coefficient ni dx, n is coefficient ni dy. Tandaan nyo yan ha. Now take the partial derivative of m with respect to y. So x will be held constant. So dito, kopyahin mo lang yung 2x, differentiate mo yung y squared, and that is 2y dy over dy times 1 lang yan. Minus, differentiate mo yung negative 2y with respect to y, so we have minus 2. Or this will become what? 4xy minus 2. Or factoring out negative 2. So 2 times what? 2xy and minus 1. Okay? So now, ito naman sa pangalawa naman, we have to take the partial derivative of n with respect to x. So y is held constant. So here, yan. Copy mo lang yung 3y. Differentiate mo yung x squared. That is 2x. Minus, differentiate mo yung 4x. So 4. This will become 6xy minus 4. So anong na-notice mo? Yung partial derivative ni m with respect to y is not equal dun sa partial derivative ni n with respect to x. So dahil dyan, ito ay non-exact DE. So what you will do is try natin kunin yung difference. Baka sakaling makuha pa natin yung integrating factor at magiging exact yung ating DE once we multiply that integrating factor. Sige, pakitandaan. Take the difference first. So partial of m with respect to y minus natin sa partial of n with respect to x. Ano yung partial of m with respect to y? 4xy minus 2. So that is 4xy minus 2. I-subtract natin yung ano yung value ng partial derivative ni n? So 6xy minus 4. 6xy minus 4n. Combine like terms na lang. 4xy minus 6xy, we have what? Negative 2xy. Negative 2 plus, plus 4. It's positive 2 kasi negative 2 minus negative 4. So positive 2. Now this means that, yeah. Anong result dito guys? Factoring out 2 for negative 2. So negative 2 xy minus 1 siya. Now, tingnan natin yung value ng m tsaka ng n. Okay, remember, if we divide yung m dun sa difference, it's as if we are canceling x. So dapat pure function of y yung lalabas. If we divide naman n dun sa ating difference, we are as if canceling yung y, kasi nga partner niya si dy, dapat ang lalabas is pure function of x. Now take a look at n. May makakancel ka ba dun kapag si n yung i-divide natin? Diba? 3 and 4. Wala, diba? Pero dito sa m, tingnan ka dito. Now, if we are to factor out, anong common dito? Merong 2y, no? So 2y times, ang matitira dito, we have xy minus 1. Now, if you divide m dun sa ating difference, which is, ito na, makansel natin yung x minus y, dapat ang lalabas is pure function of y, which is correct naman. No? May matitira ka pang y dyan. Sige. Divide na natin c. Now, we divide m. And m is what? Ano ulit yun? 2y. So 2y times xy minus 1. So ganun din dito. 2y xy minus 1. Here, 2y xy minus 1. We can cancel now xy minus 1, cancel also 2. Anong natira natin? Negative 1 over y. So a pure function of y. Okay, so tama. Now we can obtain the integrating factor. Sige, the integrating factor is I equals e raised to, dahil sa function of y siya, may negative ka. E raised to negative integral of g of y, or yan, function of y times dy. Plug in lang natin. So e raised to the negative of negative d, ayan, integral of negative dy over y. So maging positive ito, ln lang yung kalalabasan yan. So it will be e raised to ln of y, or basically, our integrating factor is y. Gets? Hello? Do you follow? Kasi kayo yung tatapos nito.
Yes po.
Sige, the next step is, since meron na tayong integrating factor, i-multiply natin siya dun sa ating given na equation. Tapos, ang gagawin ninyo, i-test nyo ngayon yung DE for exactness. Dapat mag-equal yung partial derivatives. Yung partial derivative ni m with respect to y should be equal or must be equal to partial derivative of n with respect to x. Sige. So ito yung ating integrating factor, guys. Yung ating integrating factor, you multiply this dun sa ating given equation, which is, balik tayo, 2xy squared. Yan, 2xy squared minus 2y times dx plus 3x squared y minus 4x times dy, yan, equal to 0. So, ang magiging equation natin, exact equation, will be, distribute mo lang yung y, so this will be 2xy cubed minus 2y squared times dx plus, here, so you have 3x squared y squared minus 4xy times dy equal to 0. Okay, so you're now going to test this DE for exactness. Ito yung iyong m. This is your n. And you have to take note that partial of m with respect to y should be equal or must be equal to partial of n with respect to x para masabing exact. And then you solve for the solution. Okay, para ma-check niyo yung solution na pareho tayo ng sagot, isulat ko na yung pinaka solution, sorry. So the answer to this, gamitin niyo na yung short method, guys, ha. Your answer should be x squared y cubed minus 2xy squared equal to c. Clear? Gawin niyo muna to, ha.
Yes po.
Solve niyo muna yung partial derivatives. Ayan. Dapat equal sila para masabi na exact equation. Right. And ang next topic natin will be about linear equation. Kasama to sa notes yung ipapasa sa akin mamaya or pipicturean niya. Nakopya na? Okay? Sige, let me stop sharing this one. And share ko yung